Hello everyone, my name is Billy Walker. Today we'll be demoing our final project for Command Shift, which is DLicious, an online cookbook app. First, we'll start with our presentation. So DLicious is at its core a cookbook. It's a private database that allows you to store, edit, and delete your recipes, as well as access new ones from an API, and can also generate a meal plan for you based on your caloric intake. Since I move around quite a lot, it's very difficult to keep any physical recipe books around as they're very large and very heavy. Though other similar apps to DLicious exist, many of them are tied to specific websites or require subscriptions. For example, Taste.com or the New York Times Cooking. We felt this was a great opportunity to cover many of the tools and practices we've learned since starting the course, especially in the front end, because this is a very front end heavy project. It's also a topic we're interested in: food, cooking, and preserving recipes. So our front-end stack used a variety of mostly React tools, as it is a very React and front-end heavy project. It uses React itself, React Router, and DOM, as well as Firebase for user authentication and Splides for our recipe carousel. We also used a number of very common tools like .env, styled components, and Axios. Because the backend was relatively simple compared to the front end, it uses just a few packages. .env, nodemon, express.js, and cores are our central packages. It runs on PostgreSQL, which meant we could also use Postman to send and receive data, and pgadmin to monitor the specifics of our database. The database itself used a Docker image. As part of development, we picked up a few of those tools for the first time. Splides and style components were both new use cases for me, and I also used Firebase for the first time outside of the course. We also use the Spoonacular API, which allows users to pull new recipes by a wide variety of categories. It's a very food-focused API and was absolutely perfect for this project. In terms of our development practices, we wanted to make sure we had clear communication and planning set out immediately. I was abroad for almost the entire time we had to work on the project, which meant that communicating our notes, key points, or detailed commit breakdowns was more important than ever. Our overall design was mocked up in Figma, as you can see on the left, which gave us a clear layout for the project's actual design as well as user routes throughout. Trello served as our to-do list and project guidelines, reminding us of our broader aims as well as our minimum goals. The main issue we had was communicating across time zones. As I said before, I was abroad, so timing any meetings was very difficult and had a noticeable impact on my ability to keep up with Andrea, especially in the early stages of the project. Firebase authentication also took up a lot of time initially, as I was struggling to understand the logic and implementing it properly into the project. We also had to take some time in the final week to sort out a number of Git conflicts before we could present our project. We do have further goals for this project. The Spoonacular API gives very detailed options for their recipes, and we hope to allow a user to directly save a recipe from the API to their personal cookbook. We've also investigated a price scraper that we could use to calculate a rough price of a recipe, but were unable to implement it in time. More minor additions include an image upload for user recipes and a more thorough testing suite. We'll now do a quick demonstration of how our front end actually works for a user. Here we have our login or sign up page. This uses the Firebase authentication to limit a signed out user to just this page and automatically redirect them if they try and access anywhere else on the website. A signed in user can, of course, access the rest of the app, no problems. Here we can sign in. And we are immediately redirected to our homepage. Here we can see the recipes that the user has added. Here we have pad thai, guacamole, some dessert recipes. We also have a link to add a new recipe form. And then we also have some popular recipes drawn from the API that we have access to. Here is an example of adding a recipe. You can give the recipes a title, a cuisine, a cooking time in minutes, and so on. This redirects the user to the newly created recipe in their database, which we'll do now. Create recipe. And as you can see, we've been redirected. Displays the cuisine, cooking time, servings, a list of ingredients, and the instructions. Each recipe also has a delete and edit button, which you can see here. Deleting, of course, wipes the recipe from the database, and edit allows users to tweak the recipe as desired. We'll now take you on a quick look through our code, starting with our front end. We have here our sign-in logic. This is a very standard Firebase user with email and password, as you can see. It takes authentication, the email, and the password, and then returns those user credentials. If there's an error, it gives us an error message. This form is very simple: email, password, submit button. And we can see very, very similar code in the signup function, just with create user with email and password instead. Our create recipe form uses a post request, as you can see on this line, to send its data to our backend. We also split the ingredients array here by new line, so as to make sure that the array is returned to the user as a list when they access the recipe later. Our recipe controller in the backend handles all of our data here. We have, for example, get recipe, used by our carousels to display some of the data, get recipe by ID for the more detailed recipes on the actual recipe page, delete recipe by ID, self-explanatory, and patch recipe by ID. Patch recipe has a number of if statements to handle errors or missing inputs, and also an error here in case the user tries to patch a recipe with no changes to it.
Thanks, Billy. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about our DLicious app, our recipe maker or a recipe book, a recipe app, basically, where you can look through a lot of recipes or you can create your own recipes and store them. We also have a meal planner here at the top. I'll talk a little bit about that more later. Basically, if you're signed in, you'll have those two extra features here, so you can have your own recipe area where you can add recipes, delete and edit. Billy will talk a bit more about that as well later on. We have a meal planner as well, where you can basically look for recipes depending on how many calories you want. I'll talk about that in a bit, but first we're going to talk about here the homepage. So if you're logged in, you will see a recipes carousel where you can add more recipes and you can look through the recipes that you've also created as a user. And you could click on one of them, you can go to your recipe as well, and you can either edit or delete. And then if you go back, you'll have a couple of carousels here that we've added, basically pulling from the Spinacular API, which is a recipes API, a very comprehensive one. And we show sort of the popular recipes here. You can click on the recipe and you give you the details for that recipe as well. And can choose by recipes, or just wanted to show some pasta recipes, for example, so you can sort of look through them as well. We have also a search bar, and that will allow you to look through also all through the Spinacular API through all the recipes. So you can just type an ingredient like chocolate, and it will also give you the first sort of 9 hits of the most popular sort of chocolate recipes. Any other, maybe cookie, and you get sort of cookie recipes as well. So that's it with the home page here. You also have a meal planner, and this one is basically just an extra sort of page here that we've added. And also, if you are logged in, you'll be able to have access to that. And let's say you want any recipes up to 3,000 calories, and then you're gonna get a few recipes, and it will give you sort of the details of the recipes here: carbohydrates, fat, protein. This is it. You can go to the recipe as well. So when you click to go to the recipe, just gonna open a new tab here, and you end up going to the Spinacular website, and it shows you in a bit more details about that particular recipe as well. And this is pretty much it for my part here on the homepage and the meal planner. I'll talk a little bit now about the code and how we've created those features. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the code for our DLicious app. I'm going to talk a bit about the React app that we set up. Basically, we used the Create React app to set up our front-end app. And with that, we're making requests to the Sponacular API. We set up our APIs, and also we have our Firebase authentication here, which Billy will talk about. We've got our entry point, which is our app component, main component. We're also using the React Router DOM to change between the pages and the links and the header links as well, and also to have the authentication done so the user will have the extra features, and if you're not a user, you log out, you be sent to the login page or create account page, but you can still look for recipes from the API. So this is our header, and with using the nav link from the React Router DOM, the auth from Firebase. We've got our header component here, and we also have a couple of our components that are on the front end, which is the popular here, which is a component that will just pull in from the API for the popular recipes and display the first 9. And we're also using, for the carousels, we're using the Splide carousel, which is quite a nice component carousel in React, JavaScript carousel. We can pass in the object to just what we want, how many cards we want, and also make it responsive. So when it's in mobile, it only shows 2 cards at a time. It's also quite nice because it's draggable, as well as you can just click on the arrows to scroll between them. We also have created a component, a recipe card component, that will pass the props down to the other components, such as popular. We had the veggie, but we decided to actually create a pasta, pull in the pasta, which is the pasta carousel, which shows the most popular pasta recipes, and is pretty much the same as the popular component. We also have our meal planner as well. So we've got our page here. We've got a separate pages structure for all our main pages, and for the meal planner, we've got our main meal planner page, which you can access if you're logged in. We're using a bit of everything, just regular CSS as well as style components, which is quite nice and very quick to add as well to the components. You wrap the components around with the main styles. So it's over to Billy now. Thank you.
Finally, thank you to our tutors at Command Shift for a really fun 6 months. Thank you to Andrea for being so patient with me while I was away, and thank you to my partner Lena, who supported me throughout the course.